Okay, so basically what I would like to speak about, if you look at the TRIZ body of knowledge, then one large part of it, and a very important part, is something which is referred to as the laws of technical system evolution. There are 8 laws in classical TRIZ, and you have static laws and, like traditionally kinematic and dynamic. So, and I would like to be speaking just about one of them, which is the first law, and the first law is the law of system completeness. And basically what it says that any viable technical system consists of 4 parts: engine, transmission, working unit, and control unit. And for what it said that for the technical system to perform well, there should be 4 of these parts, and at least one of them should have a certain degree of controllability. If we take a car as a technical system, well, the engine is clear. Now, transmission is also more or less clear. Now, what is the working unit in a car?
The suspension and wheels?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So it's basically the wheel. So the working unit in a system normally, and now I will bring some more confusion to you because I will introduce the word tool in one more meaning. Again, in classical TRIZ, what you very often work with, especially when you work with arrays, you speak about the object and the tool. So when you try to formulate the function of the system and to understand what you work with, you speak about the object, and the object, or sometimes in English translation they refer to this as a product. So that's basically what you want to change. So when you formulate the function and when you say to change, so the object is the element. So the system is always there to modify in some way some kind of element. So that's the object. And we usually say that the object is something which is not changeable, meaning that when we solve a problem, in most cases we can't change the object. It's a given thing. And then we have the tool, and the tool is something which actually changes this object. So, and the tool very often is the working unit. Or, say, working unit is a part of the tool, in a sense, when we change something. Just to take, I don't know, another example of a technical system. If we take a technical system as a syringe, for instance, so what would be the working unit, engine, transmission?
Of a syringe?
Mm-hmm. It is a technical system, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Well, the engine would be your thumb.
okay.
Working unit would be the needle. Control unit.
Here, why I wanted to give you this example, that basically sometimes there is a problem of defining the working unit. And in order to have fewer problems defining the working unit, you need to define the function of a system. Now, what the function of such a system as syringe, what does it do actually?
It changes the pressure
Outside
outside of the...
Not outside, inside.
No, inside.
No, it changes the pressure outside wherever you're like trying to... You either reduce the pressure to pull it out or you increase the pressure to shove it in. But it changes the pressure just at the vein.
Okay, even if we don't go into detail, even if we stop here, now what would be the working unit then? Would it be the needle?
Plunger.
The piston.
Yeah, I would say that it would be the plunger then. This is actually the thing, that's where, another way to look, to help you define the working unit, that's actually where you bring the energy. So you need to bring the energy to the working unit normally. So, and what seems to be the working unit at a first glance is not necessarily the working unit when you start analyzing it like this. So, and when you go on analyzing technical systems, it seems to work pretty well. So you'll find plenty of examples if you refer to the publication. One of the things is that very often if you operate from this law, that the technical system doesn't function very well because something is missing or some of the parts don't perform as well as they're supposed to. Now when we speak about education, we know that pedagogical system very often don't do what we expect them to do. At least this is our feeling. Now we can theoretically assume that it might happen because there is something missing in terms of completeness of a pedagogical system. Clearly it's only the assumption because the laws of technical systems evolution were basically formulated for technical systems. But what we know from research of many colleagues in different fields, that many of these laws seem to be applicable when we speak about other systems. So we can suppose that the law of completeness might be applicable in the context of education, but then the question is, how would it look like? Because with technical systems we speak about kind of structural elements of a technical system. Now what would be then structural elements in a pedagogical system, and what would be the engine, transmission, working unit and control unit? Oh yeah, I'll try to share with you one possible way. I would say that the three main elements of a pedagogical system, the first one, I'm not very happy with the word, but you can probably come up with a better. So what I mean by this, I mean skills and dispositions. But I just wanted a short word. So that's basically of the learner. That's basically what we want to change. So we want to change skills and dispositions of the learner. So the function of a pedagogical system is to change skills and disposition of the learner. So then you have something which I called material. And this is a kind of carrier, something that acts as a carrier for changing skills and dispositions of the learner. This can be, I don't know, a book or a kind of, online platform. The working unit, in my view, is actually the task, or more specifically, is the activity of performing the task. Because you can say that this is also the task here, but I would like to distinguish between the task as something which is formulated in a book, and in this respect it's part of the carrier, because all of these can be at different levels, like system, supersystem, subsystem. Yeah, so task would be subsystem of a book in this respect, and thus it is material. But then we can speak about task as an activity, like, performing a task, doing something. Because when we have one and the same task, we can actually learner can be involved in different activities while working on a task. And I think that the quality of change would depend on the way this activity is organized. So the working unit in this respect would be performing a task. So by involving the learner into certain activity, we change skills and dispositions of the learner. So skills and dispositions change as a result of being involved in an activity and reflecting upon various aspects of this activity. And then you've got the control unit, but with the control unit, it can be tricky, I think, in a pedagogical system. Traditionally, the control unit in a pedagogical system is the teacher. But the problem with the teacher, I think, is that it's not ideal for a pedagogical system, because if you accept this, the teacher is an outside element. It's not inside the system. The pedagogical system doesn't actually include the teacher. Doesn't actually need the teacher. And if you look at basically at what is happening, if you can get one of the elements of the system to perform the function of control well, then you don't need the teacher. For example, if we can build an online learning system that can actually give adaptive feedback, not pre-programmed feedback, fantastic. So then it can actually perform the function of the teacher. If we have a truly independent learner who can actually plan everything by him or herself, implement, evaluate, then the learner, him or herself, adopts the function of the control unit. And in this respect, the system is more ideal because it doesn't need the teacher as an element. So the teacher in this respect is an outside element, so an external element. When you use the resources of the system, it's always more ideal than when you need the outside resources, because you already have it in the system, so it costs less in a general sense. So it's already in the system, in a super system or subsystem, but not completely outside. Well, what I haven't spoken about yet is the energy. It seems to me that the energy, when we speak about pedagogical system, is actually motivation. That's the energy. It can be internal, it can be external, but there need to be some kind of motivation for the learner to be involved into the activity. Because if there is no motivation, any kind of motivation, there is no way to involve the learner into the activity of working on a task that will change the learner as a result. So transmission would be, for instance, the carrier might boost motivation. For example, the task can be attractive. Or, I don't know, when you say, for instance, we will work on a film, some people say, oh, that's a wonderful idea. So in this respect, so it works very well as kind of, turning on the motivation, so the carrier can actually do that very often. Well, we have to remember that we still have the learner, the object, and all the resources in the learner, because the learner is always inside the system, because, whatever the pedagogical system it works with the learner at different levels. At a level of a particular task or at the level of school education, they still interact with the learner. And even at the level of lifelong learning, we still have the learner as the object which we want to change. So all the resources of the learner are always there. What I'm speaking about now are the structure of the system. Systems will be different because this is the idea of the law, that no matter what is the system, it will have certain structural elements. So if we could understand the required structural elements for a pedagogical system, then when we come to evaluate the quality of a system, whatever level it is, maybe it is a lesson, maybe it is the subject, maybe it is the school, maybe it is just work on a particular task, we would have a tool for evaluating the quality of work of a system. For example, if we see that there is something wrong with a lesson, so one way which we could analyze it would be to look at the structural elements and checking if all the parts are there, maybe something is missing. If we're speaking about an assumed law of completeness in education, it should be useful for us to do something. For instance, when we design a lesson or when we design a curriculum, this should be helpful for us to design it better. But what I try to think about possible reasons why pedagogical systems fail. I'll try to share with you the problems which I thought about just by looking back at different things I've come across. If we take the topic, there are at least two problems which I can clearly see with the topic. So the first is that the topic is just missing in a pedagogical system, which means that whoever is in control of the system, maybe the teacher or maybe the learner, hasn't defined what they actually want to change. They have certain materials in place, they follow these materials, they do certain tasks, but when we ask them what the point, they don't know. So I think we're all familiar with examples that illustrate this. So here it would mean that this part is missing. It just hasn't been defined, and it should be defined. One of the problems why the pedagogical system might fail is that the material doesn't perform the function of transmitting the energy. Meaning if we say that they should boost motivation, and when the texts we use are dull, it just doesn't work. Another thing why it might not be working very well is the same thing with using resources of the system or resources outside the system. We can compare learning via doing real-life tasks or artificial tasks. So if we can learn from being involved in real-life tasks, it's sort of more ideal because it's inside the system than when we have to bring the tasks which don't actually exist in real life, and the learner knows that they don't exist, so and as a result feeling less motivated. So if I can teach everything I want to teach, I'm exaggerating now of course, everything I want to teach by, I don't know, cooking a meal together with a child, it's much more ideal than having 101 different, activities which are supposed to teach the child. So it's perfect. I mean, we learn everything by doing an activity we have to do anyway, and the child, enjoys doing it. So this is the idea. So, and in this respect, what is already inside, for example, those routine things the child does, whatever it is, they may be different from child to child. But if the child does it, and we can use it as a carrier for what we want to teach, it's more ideal in this respect. So, and in this sense, the level of controllability is higher. Another problem which I see, that the task, meaning that the activity of performing the task, is missing. That's a very widely spread problem of pedagogical systems. So whoever is in control assumes that here is the task, you ask somebody to do it, and it means that they were involved in the activity, which is not the case. So to do the task, meaning, to put some kind of answer, does not necessarily mean to be involved in the learning activity that leads to changing skills and dispositions. Another problem that might exist, funnily enough, that the task is not coordinated, is not in harmony with the topic. That we have the task, there is an activity students are involved in, but this is not connected with the skills and dispositions you actually want to change. Another problem which I've thought about is that the control unit is not performing well. Whether the teacher or the learner, they just don't want to control. So they don't care about checking that these elements work well. So you have the teacher who does certain things, but these things somehow don't improve the way these elements function. What I'm trying to say, that this element is there, I think according to different views, how we, look at the world, some people would add something else here, but there should be the content part. So this is basically what? So, say to me it would be skills and dispositions, to you it would be skills, dispositions and values, to a third person it would be something else, but anyway there is this what part. So what we want to change. So basically what we can do, technically speaking, we can build the ENV of the learner. We can make a list of parameters of the learner we want to change. And this would go here, whatever we call it. In this respect, the object is always outside the system. The general picture would be that you have energy, which can very often be outside the system, and the object, which can be outside the system. And then you have the actual system, where you have the engine, then transmission, then working unit, and then control unit. But sometimes it can be partially inside, sometimes, but energy and the object are not necessarily inside the system, so it can be outside as well. But the working unit should be in direct contact with the object, otherwise it will just not change. More ideal system is when there is a kind of convergence, so the object actually takes some of the functions, so and it can do so. Basically, when the object can modify itself, is always more ideal. So if we can find some resources of the object that can help it modify itself,
then it would come into the system? It's still outside the system.
You said when the
it would come into the system because it means that it would perform some of the functions of these
you
elements.
said if the learner can perform the function of
The
control,
control unit is
it
inside
becomes
the system.
inside the system.
Yeah, I agree. It's true.
Yeah.
As we said, the carrier can become more ideal, and when we speak about the real activities of the learner, I mean, these are the things which the learner does by being part of other systems, not pedagogical systems initially, I don't know, work-based learning. So the person is actually doing something and learning at the same time. So pedagogical system works within some kind of, then it's also more ideal because you don't need a special carrier, so something that already exists there adopt the function of the carrier.